I write a letter to my black daughter about Kamala Harris. Let's talk about it, y'all. Middle America. Well, this is the first time I'm doing this. I've got a black daughter named Zoe-Rae. And I named her after the Bible. John chapter 1, in him was life, and the life was the light of men. The life was the light of men, so I named her Zoe for life, and then Ray for light. What I did not know is that the Greek version of the Old Testament, Eve's name is actually Zoe. So Eve, if anybody knows me, is one of my favorite characters of all time. So Zoe is a very, very meaningful human being to me. And it cannot be denied that we're in the context of some very important history here. And so the big elephant in the room is obviously that Kamala Harris is the first African American, she's not African American, black person of color, whatever, black woman who has ever won the office of vice presidency. And much like when Barack Hussein Obama won, there is a lot of excitement in the black community and a lot of celebration and a lot of crying because Ms. Harris has seemingly accomplished that feat. I've seen a lot of memes about it, seen a lot of video clips about it, seen a lot of crying people about it, and I'm not one of these people that says you shouldn't cry over politics, because politics is simply the collective zeitgeist expressed in policy. And so to some degree, if there's anything you should be crying about, it should be politics. Be that as it may. There's a whole bunch of celebration about this. And so I am making this video, Zoe, directly to you, as my daughter, about Ms. Harris and what her selection means, what it means for the history of black people in this country, what it means to the history of women in this country, and try to reconcile it with what I've taught you about being a black woman, being a descendant of Africans, being a Christian, and being someone who loves their neighbor as self, and our ultimate family ethos, which is we are always, always, always going to be on the side of the underdog and the vulnerable. So what follows, Zoe, is specially for you, that I'm sharing with other people, but this is especially for you, and I want you to think long and hard about what I'm about to say to you, and how this woman manifests where we are in this country and where we need to go. This video is partially inspired by the great Izzy Jimenez, who wrote probably the most articulate response to a political issue I've ever seen in my life. I will post that in the comments section if I can remember it. But essentially what she wrote was about the selection of Kamala Harris and why it is different than the selection of Mr. Obama. She says the following: say what you want about Obama as President of the United States, but his getting there was phenomenal and historic, a crowning achievement. A man who in another time would have been considered a lesser species had risen to the leader of the free world. We were given a handsome, charismatic, intelligent, articulate, and inspiring black man who won the hearts of Americans and the world. His legacy as president will be debated for years, but there is no denying his achievement filled the nation with hope and promise for a new era. Okay, so that's what she said about Mr. Obama. And then she had some things to say about Kamala Harris. Now, I've seen a lot of memes about Kamala. Hope I'm pronouncing her name properly, or Kamala. If I'm mispronouncing it, I promise you it's not on purpose. But this is not that. It didn't matter what side of the political aisle you were on when Mr. Obama was elected. The fact of the matter is, this man showed up, he showed out, and he won the hearts of people with a hard-fought win against Hillary Clinton, who was basically the anointed incumbent for the presidency. And make no mistake about it, Hillary launched a racially charged Islamophobic attack against Mr. Obama, and yet he came out victorious. Why am I saying that Kamala Harris is different? Kamala Harris began her political career by joining the prosecutorial team of the state of California in the year 1994. Now, that year is obviously very significant to black Americans, black men in particular, because that was the year in which Joe Biden's infamous crime bill, in which on the Senate floor he said that we were beyond the pale, as well as saying that we were predators, only to be one up the next day by Hillary Rodham Clinton, who called us super predators who needed to be brought to heel, was passed. She joined in 1994. She then quickly ascended to become the AG, and in that period of time, as everybody knows, the prison industrial complex, which is the marriage of Jim Crow racism and capitalistic greed, coincided together to create a massive spike in the prison population, most of which affected black males. That is a fact. You know, one of the more controversial speakers that I listened to said, there was no crisis of black fathers in the 60s. There's no crisis of black fathers in the 70s. You didn't have a whole glut of single black women. What happened in the 80s and 90s? Well, the crack epidemic happened in the 80s in black neighborhoods. And then in the 90s, the crack epidemic was penalized with the crime bill, etc. This idea that black men are genetically sort of disposed to abandoning their children is not true. What is true, however, is that there are certain laws that are not applied at the same rate. We know that. So here, enter Kamala Harris. This is Medium.com. Medium.com is not a right-wing organization at all. As a matter of fact, you will find that this is actually a far-left, hyper-progressive, and this young lady, Kalanda Mulamba, is a Pan-African Marcus Garveyite type young lady. She says the following. She's got an article that was written in 2019, August 18th, 2019, that says the following. Kamala's crimes against black people, 8 reasons why we should oppose Kamala Harris. Okay, this is on Medium.com. It was written by Kalenda Mulamba, New York-based African internationalist writer, a voice for African, black, poor, and working class. That's a far left individual. This is not a right winger. This is what she said about Miss Harris. Crime number 4. Harris opposed reforming the 3 strikes law. The vice presidential candidate has repeatedly supported, actually, this was written in 2020. Sorry, not 2019. The vice presidential candidate has repeatedly supported the 3 strikes law, also known as the habitual offender law, and opposed reforming it. The 3 strikes law is when an individual is sentenced to life in prison after they've committed 3 crimes. They've been convicted of 3 crimes. The law was adopted by California in 1994. In 2001, 50,000 people had been sentenced under the law, and about 12,000 prisoners were facing a minimum of 25 years in prison. Under this law, African people are imprisoned at a rate 12 times higher than whites. African people make up 7% of California's population, but a whopping 30% of California's overall prison population. We also make up 45% of third strikers serving life sentences. These anti-African laws were supported by Kamala. That's a fact. Kamala Harris is a supporter of that type of legislation. Her entire shtick was that she was a tough on crime AG. That was her entire shtick. And speaking as a black woman, there is a massive fracture in the black community between black men and black women that was actually reflected in this recent election. Black men voted for Mr. Trump at a rate that has never been seen before. Why do you think that is? Now, I'm not one of the black men who voted for Trump, but I'm certainly not one of the black men who voted for Biden either. I know who my enemies are. Now, we've talked about Kamala Harris supporting prison labor, where the government was fighting to relieve some of the prison overpopulation by saying, hey, if folks are doing a good job in prison, why don't we let them out a year early? And Kamala's team of prosecutors said we can't do that because think about how it's going to affect the financial ramifications of the state of California. We've got these people doing firefighting jobs, risking their lives for $1 an hour. Kamala then said, I can't believe, this is shocking to me. But then when she was pressed about whether or not she was going to discontinue that or re-examine that, she offered no comment. Harris refused to prosecute police who murdered African people. The uprising of the black working class that followed the police murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and shows that we are fed up with the police of killing of our people. Kamala Harris isn't fed up, however, as she has repeatedly refused to prosecute police who murder black people. That is a fact. As California's Attorney General, she refused to intervene in cases involving killings by the police. In 2015, she opposed a bill requiring her to investigate police shootings. Here's another one that's particularly heinous. Ms. Harris locked up African parents because their children missed school. As San Francisco's district attorney, Harris also charged, criminalized, and imprisoned African parents because their children were truant. They hyperlink a Huffington Post article, which was written 3/27/2019, The Human Cost of Kamala Harris's War on Truancy. On the morning of 18 April 2013, in the Los Angeles suburb of Buena Park, a throng of photographers positioned themselves on a street curb and watched as two police officers entered a squat townhouse. Minutes later, their cameras began clicking. The officers had reemerged with a weary-looking woman in pajamas and handcuffs, and the photographers were jostling to capture her every step. This is the young lady who was arrested. You would swear that I had killed someone, the woman, Cherie Peoples, said in a recent interview. Here's Miss Peoples being dragged before the media in handcuffs, in her pajamas, looking a bit confused. Why was she arrested? Because of Mrs. Harris's policy of not only locking up the fathers of these truant kids, but now the struggling single mother who has no man beside her because he's in prison. Now she is also in jail because her child is truant. Maybe if there was a father in the house, Miss Harris, maybe if there was a father in the house for not in prison because of weed, in which you locked thousands and thousands and thousands of black men up for, maybe that dad could give him the old-fashioned ghetto treatment and the kid would have stayed in school. But here we are. Now the kid's out of school and the parent is being dragged in front and made a show of. Trust me, I know how this stuff operates. You alert the media about what's going to happen. The media shows up there and they make a big show of it. It's called a perp walk, whatever you want to call it. Kamala Harris did this to another black woman. Kamala Harris invented this law and came up with this statute knowing full well the demographic of people it was going to harm. Now we know Kamala Harris almost killed a man. There is this man who was on parole. He was on death row, 2 days away from death row. And his lawyers found new DNA evidence that would have exonerated him, but Kamala needed to approve a reopening and a re-examination of the case. She declined to do so. And then a New York Times article, an in-depth New York Times article, was published which demonstrated that this man was innocent and that he needed to be re-released. And it was then that Ms. Harris said, "Oh, this is terrible. We need to reconsider this." And so this man's life was spared. Let me ask you a question, sweetheart, because this is for you. This woman was the AG. Do you think maybe that she had access to all the information that the New York Times did? Yeah, I think she did. Even in her political response, like, "I can't believe this is happening," she never once said, "All this is new information to me." It wasn't new information. The only variable was that the New York Times printed it and held her accountable, and as such saved her life. There's another man that Kamala Harris, whose life she almost destroyed. Well, she partially actually did destroy. A man by the name of Jamal Truelove. And there was no physical evidence, just like in the previous case, to convict this man. But then there was an eyewitness who was incidentally given about $75,000 from Ms. Harris's office for witness relocation, whatever, to testify against him. According to Truelove, Harris was present at the hearings, announcing both the verdict and the sentencing in his case. She even briefly locked eyes with him at one of the proceedings, offering what seemed like a smirk. She wanted to be present for a celebration of a conviction, Truelove said. That's what it felt like, a celebration. This is a woman who didn't show up to any of his defense hearings, only showed up to his conviction and his sentencing with a smirk on her face. Well, Mr. Truelove had some very good lawyers, and it turned out that the case was overturned. He spent 7 years in prison. He was convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison, and he was completely innocent, and he was so innocent that he sued the state and won to the tune of $13 million. But Ms. Harris and her prosecutors aggressively went after this guy, spent taxpayer money from California to aid the person who was going to speak against him so that this black man could end up behind bars. Ms. Harris, in another article, it is said, she is hard on black people, she's not hard on crime. What do you mean, Dad? What do you mean she's hard on black people and not hard on crime? Oh, let me help you. There's a case of a young girl. Her name was Celeste Guap. She was 16 years old. And the police department and other law enforcement agencies, the blue, back the blue, made a habit of sexually explicitly texting this girl who was a known prostitute, and some of them procured her services at the age of 16. You know what that's called? That's called statutory rape. And so the cases weren't going anywhere. So the private lawyer for this girl, the cases weren't going anywhere. And so the private lawyer began to ask Kamala Harris and her team of prosecutors to take over the case. There was even a change.org plea for Ms. Harris to take over the case. And you know what happened? Nothing. She didn't take over the case. And those 6 California cops who sent explicit text messages to the teenage prostitute and had sex with dozens of officers when she's underage were given warning letters but kept their jobs. Isn't it strange Ms. Harris gets involved in such things as truancy? Such things as thousands and thousands of black men behind bars for marijuana? But then when it comes to a young girl who's a person of color, that's right down the identity politics lane, right? She's a female, she's Hispanic, she's a person of color, might be undocumented. This is a perfect person for Kamala Harris to defend. And for some reason, she refuses to go after the folks who did this to this girl. What's the only variable? That's right. These are police officers. They are representations of the institution of law enforcement, which is the military arm, as I've said on millions and millions of occasions, of white supremacy. And it makes no sense if you have an institution that's designed to uphold and enforce white supremacy that you would go after them if you're on the same team. That's a fact. You can say whatever you want about Miss Harris, but Miss Harris, throughout her entire career beginning in 1994, knew exactly what team she was playing on, and it wasn't ours. That's a fact. Go ahead and explain to me how you can come to any other conclusion. Here's the last one from CNN. Kamala Harris supported a 2008 San Francisco policy that reported arrested undocumented juveniles to ICE. You know, Donald Trump is a monster. ICE is horrible. ICE needs to be disbanded. As District Attorney of San Francisco, Kamala supported a city policy that required law enforcement to turn over undocumented juveniles to federal immigration authorities if they were arrested and suspected of committing a felony, regardless of whether they were actually convicted of a crime. So whether or not you were convicted, just you being accused or suspected of committing a felony will get you a first-class ticket to ICE. Kamala Harris supported that. She was San Francisco's DA from 2004 to 2011, sided with then-Mayor Gavin Newsom in a political fight. By the way, this happened in 2008. Do you know who the president was in 2008? That was George Herbert Walker Bush. And then Mr. Obama took over. So this is Kamala Harris. A person who has consistently been on the side of institutions, sweetheart, that has been designed to destroy your father and then by extension you. Ms. Harris has been a bulwark and a pillar in the cause of white supremacy. She has been an A player in the cause of mass incarceration. And Ms. Harris is so dedicated to the concept of mass incarceration of black and colored people that Ms. Harris invents new statutes and then makes a big deal out of humiliating this single black mother who's stressed out and confused for her master. So I'm going to finish what Isabel wrote. Kamala Harris is no Barack Obama. She won no hearts. The country showed its disdain for her when she couldn't even make it to Iowa. I'll do you one better. Miss Harris had to pull out before California because she didn't want to deal with the humiliation of losing to Bernie Sanders in her home state. That's a fact. That's a fact. She dropped out long before Iowa, relatively speaking, because she could not deal with the fact that a septuagenarian, practically octogenarian, white Jewish guy had more of the hearts and souls of black people than she did. She's supposedly one of us, sweetheart. The country showed its disdain for her. She couldn't even make it to Iowa. Her being chosen was a calculation to manipulate the black and the female vote. That's a fact. That's a fact. Sweetheart, what you're going to notice about black people in the political sphere is that they're the simplest, most easily manipulated group of people that have no sense of pride, dignity, and honor and self-worth whatsoever. That's just a fact. You know, they tried this with white women, 2016, with Miss Hillary Clinton, and white women were like, nah, no. You're going to send our jobs, the jobs of us and our husbands overseas. We don't want any parts of it. We're very happy that you're a woman. That's great. But you're not going to improve our lives. You're going to make our lives worse. So they rolled the dice with Donald Trump because white women are not as easy to manipulate politically as black people are. Black people, particularly, sweetheart, I hate to say it, but black women in particular are the easiest group of people to manipulate. Now, there are historical and sociological reasons for that. A lot of it, sweetheart, is the fact of the matter is there is still a deep craving in the hearts of many black people to be accepted by a group of people that believe that they are beneath them. These people, listen, not all white people are like this. But let me tell you something. If you have a woman like that, who has a public record of being singularly on the side of white supremacists, and they put that person in front of you and said, this is the person that we're going to give to you as your first black female vice president, you know that they have no respect for you in any way, shape, or form, that they actually disdain you and cannot stand your existence and want to erase you from history. That's what them setting up Kamala Harris is. Now, sweetheart, you're going to hear about Kamala Harris's, her personal life and all things like that. Just ignore that nonsense. That's just misogynistic double standards, right? All these guys, Kennedy, all the rest of them, they all had these indiscretions, and the minute a woman does it, then it's a big deal. So just ignore that, sweetheart. But this stuff right here, the fact that they would put this woman up after everything she's done to our people indicates that these people hate us. They hate you. It's obvious. They hate you, and they have no respect for you in any way, shape, or form. Do not watch what people say. Watch what they do. The Democratic Party had other viable black female candidates that they could have selected that would have actually done better with black men than Kamala did, but they specifically chose her. Do you know why? It's a principle I use with you guys all the time. What you reward is what you want to replicate. That's a fact. What you reward is what you want to replicate. And so they chose Kamala because they wanted to replicate her. They want a whole country full of Kamalas who will sell out their people, sell out women, and be loyal to the military arm of white supremacy, otherwise known as law enforcement. That's just a fact. Not all white people are like this, by the way. Not all white people are like this. But there are contingencies of white folks that are like this, and when they push people like that in your face, you know what's happening. Isabel continues. You do well to listen to women like Isabel. You don't even have to listen to Daddy all the time. Listen to Isabel, except on abortion. Her being chosen was a calculation to manipulate the black and female vote. She didn't even have to work for it. It was given to her. She has no history to be admired and instills no feelings of hope. That's a fact. And you expect me to be happy about this. Isabel is a woman of color, but she's a woman of color that cannot be manipulated. Asking me to do so is the equivalent of telling a black man he should just shut up and be grateful that his master chose to pick him out of the fields and make him his house nigger. That's a fact. Now, sweetheart, I know you're not necessarily a fan of Malcolm X, but when Brother Malcolm starts talking to you about the house nigger and the field nigger, this is exactly what he's talking about. Now, Candace Owens is a easily identified house Negro. She's easily identified. Right? But Kamala Harris is a much worse house nigger than Candace Owens. Candace Owens is an influential rhetorician. Okay? That's all she is, really. Like, Candace Owens has not really done anything material to harm our people. But this woman is an absolute traitor. And as Brother Minister Farrakhan said, Brother Minister made a statement about what would happen in a black nation once we were able to secede and create a nation of our own. I'll let you YouTube that yourself. Your wokeness is insulting. History is written by the victor, and you can elevate Kamala to your kids all you want, but they too will one day have an awakening. Well, see, little sister, I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to tell you the truth raw now. Like my personal journey, they too will soon realize the emptiness of her appointment. You, Biden and Harris supporters, are the victors, and to you go the spoils. They're really not the victors because nothing is going to happen, which I guess most people who voted for Biden and Harris want some sort of change to happen. And you watch, sweetheart, in the next 4 years what changes actually happen that benefit regular people. You watch. Just know you have stolen the joy and gratification of watching greatness unfold for a generation of women who fought for you. That's true. I feel very, very bad for you, actually, that I can get the boys together and pull them together and say, okay, now look, Obama, he petered out, he was horrible, he did terrible things, he's a war criminal. However, look at how this man angled his gifting, and look how he angled himself around powerful white people when they threw everything at him. He understood that he was in the midst of a racist institution, by the way, which is the reason that he selected Joe Biden as his running mate. Right? So there are a lot of lessons that I could show the boys to replicate from Mr. Obama's actions. Because many of them that he used to get to the office of the presidency was absolutely admirable and something that the boys can replicate. But there is literally nothing I can show you about this woman that got her to the position she's in that you want to replicate. Kamala Harris is the embodiment and the incarnation of literally everything that we're against in this family. So she's right. I pity you that that's the first one that they propped up. You can write history any way you want, but in the not too distant future, the internet will correct your narrative. The internet has already corrected the narrative. And once the psychological operation, the 4-year operation of demonizing Trump has worn off, and they actually see what they have, the internet won't have to do any work. It'll be the regular Joe over there in Michigan, especially once TPP Part 2 comes around the corner. Your daughters will learn the truth and internalize it. You've won nothing. It's a fact. It's a fact. Sweetheart, you're a black woman. You're strong. You're proud. You have your natural hair. You think for yourself. You're articulate. You're beautiful. You kill those angles in geometry. And I love you with my whole soul. Your future is extremely bright. And you, sweetheart, might be called upon by this country to undo the damages that people like Kamala have inflicted on our people. And if there's any black woman on this planet who I am confident can pull that shit off, it's you, Zoe. For sure. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I promise to stay by your side and love you and support you in all your endeavors as much as possible. And later we'll crush it in Fortnite or Among Us or whatever it is you're playing now. Love your neighbor. Take care of each other. Middle America, we are the media. Till next time, guys.